If the best cook you ever knew never once looked at a recipe, if she pressed her thumb into rising dough instead of checking the clock, smelled the fat before anything went into the pan, and knew a simmering pot from a rolling boil without lifting the lid, this list was made for you. 25 cooking tricks, never written down anywhere, passed hand to hand across kitchen tables that are mostly gone now. By the time we reach number 1, I think you will understand why none of it was ever written down in the first place. Number 25. Testing bread dough by feel, not time. My mother could tell when dough was ready by pressing 2 fingers in and watching how it pushed back. No timer taught her that. The dough would spring back slowly, slightly tacky, warm from rising, alive in a way no recipe describes. If it snapped back too fast, it needed more time. If it barely moved, it had gone too far. Yeast does not read a clock. It reads temperature, humidity, flour age, room warmth. A recipe that says, let rise 1 hour is writing for conditions that almost never exist. Touch knows what time does not. Bread mixes and machine kneading removed the hands from the process. The knowledge disappeared not because it was useless, but because the hands left first. The next trick also involves knowing something without looking, but it happens at the stove, not the counter. Number 24. The cold water secret for hard-boiled eggs that peel clean. You do not peel a boiled egg while it is hot. You move it directly from boiling water into cold water and leave it there long enough for the chill to work between the white and the membrane inside the shell. That gap is what you are creating. The temperature drop causes the white to pull slightly away from the lining, and the shell lifts off in 2 or 3 pieces instead of a dozen ragged scraps. In a kitchen where eggs were boiled by the dozen for pickling, for church potluck, for field lunches, a clean peel mattered. A torn surface soaks up too much brine and makes a poor showing on any table. The second part. Cook at a moderate simmer, not a hard boil. Hard boiling makes the white rubbery and the yolk greenish at the edge. People now sell gadgets and silicone sleeves for this. The answer was always cold water and a gentle heat. Number 23. Smelling fat to know if it's ready to fry. Fat not hot enough before food goes in soak straight through. You get grease, not a crust. Fat too hot scorches the outside before the inside cooks. The difference between those failures is a few degrees, and nobody in the kitchens I remember used a thermometer to find it. They used their nose. Bacon grease, heated slowly in cast iron, goes through stages you can smell. A warm animal scent, a deeper savory wave, then just before smoke, a sharp edge that says, stop here. Food goes in just before that edge arrives. This faded when vegetable oils replaced lard. The smell signature changed, flatter and harder to read, and no one drew a new sensory map to replace the old one. Number 22. Saving and categorizing. Fats beside nearly every stove sat a tin or crock for drippings, managed by type. Bacon fat for greens and beans. Lard, rendered from pork in autumn, for pastry and pie crust. Chicken fat for potato dishes. These were not interchangeable. Using the wrong fat in the wrong place produced something edible but noticeably lesser. The modern habit of reaching for a neutral oil is a choice to make food taste like nothing in particular. That was not a virtue any farm kitchen would have recognized. Heart health warnings in the mid-20th century drove rendered fat from American kitchens. What replaced it had no flavor, no depth, and no memory of where it came from. Number 21. Extending flour. With what was on hand. We did not always have enough white flour for what we were making. That was not a crisis. A small amount of cornmeal, a handful of rye, ground oats, or mashed potato could stretch a supply and improve the bread in the bargain. Cornmeal added crunch to the crust. Rye made the loaf denser and more staying. Potato in the dough kept it soft an extra day. Today you can pay considerable money for a blended grain bread described as artisan. What you are buying is the result of not having enough of any single thing, turned into a specialty. We called it bread. bread. None of what I have told you so far was written down anywhere I could find, not because it was not worth knowing, because you were supposed to be standing there watching. Number 20. Stretching eggs in baking. Did you know farm kitchens rationed eggs by season? In spring, the hens were generous. Come winter, laying slowed to almost nothing, and a recipe calling for 3 eggs might be made with 1. The gap filled by ground flaxseed stirred into water, or extra milk, or a small amount of vinegar alongside baking soda. Flaxseed soaked briefly produces a gel that behaves like egg white in a batter. This is now sold as a vegan innovation. It is not. It is a winter solution predating every modern dietary movement by generations. When eggs became cheap and year-round, the pressure that created this knowledge disappeared, and with it went any real understanding of what eggs actually do in a recipe. Number 19. Treating salt as a cooking tool. Not just seasoning salt on the table is flavor. Salt used during cooking is technique. In the kitchens where I learned, it was applied at multiple points. Drawn over sliced cabbage to pull moisture, pressed into meat hours before the pan, added early to braises to break down tough fibers over a long cook. My mother salted the cabbage, waited, then pressed out the liquid. That step, 15 minutes, costs nothing, is the difference between a slaw that holds its texture and one that turns soft before it reaches the table. Modern advice says, season at the end. That comes from professional cooking. A home cook who follows only that rule ends up with food that tastes flat, despite being technically seasoned. Number 18. Resting meat. Before and after. Cooking a roast, cut the moment it leaves, the heat loses half its reason for existing. The juices need time to redistribute. Cut too soon and they run onto the board and do not go back. This much is now generally known. What has nearly disappeared is the before step, dry salting meat hours ahead, sometimes overnight. A dry rubbed piece develops a firm surface that sears cleanly and browns deeply, something a wet, just washed piece cannot do. It also seasons through the full thickness rather than sitting only on the outside. We did not do this because of a theory. We did it because the meal had to be ready before the family came in from the field. Patience was built into the workday. Number 17. Souring milk on purpose. Most people today pour milk down the drain the moment it smells different. That is money leaving the kitchen. Milk that has begun to sour, not spoiled, but slightly acidic, was a baking ingredient in every kitchen I remember. It reacts with baking soda the way buttermilk does, making pancakes light and biscuits tender. The tang was not a flaw, it was flavor. Buttermilk, sold today as a specialty item, is simply the controlled version of what used to happen naturally when fresh milk sat on a cool shelf overnight. Refrigeration slowed the process, and food safety messaging taught people to treat any departure from freshness as a danger. A farmhouse kitchen knew the difference between sour and spoiled by taste. That distinction alone was worth knowing. Number 16. Using whey after cheese and butter. Making, the whey went into the bread. The bread went on the table. Nothing stopped between those two things. Whey, the pale, tangy liquid left after separating milk for cheese or butter, was never discarded in a household that made dairy regularly. It added acidity to bread dough that improved the crumb. It deepened soup bases. Diluted, it fed young pigs. Nothing in the dairy cycle ended in the waste bucket. Whey protein is sold today at prices that would have seemed unreasonable to any woman who spent her mornings at a cheese press. She was using the same substance to raise her bread. When home dairy production ended for most families, the byproducts and the instinct to use them vanished together. Number 15. Coffee grounds for more than one pot. A second pot from the morning grounds was weaker, but it was warm and it was there, and nothing left the kitchen without giving what it still had. Spent grounds went several places. A second brew served fieldwork breaks when warmth was the point. Dry grounds worked into dark meat before roasting produced a crust with a bitterness that rounded out the fat. They went into the garden soil in spring. Specialty restaurants now sell coffee-rubbed meats at a premium. What they are serving is a thrift habit dressed lost in culinary language. It was never sophisticated. It was common sense applied to something that still had use left in it. What do you do with a loaf that has gone hard on the outside and dry through the middle? Number 14, reviving stale bread with steam and heat. You wrap it in a damp cloth, not soaking, just thoroughly damp, and set it in a low oven for 15 minutes. The steam works back into the crust and crumb, and what comes out is close enough to fresh that no one at the table would refuse it. We did not throw bread away. We thought about what it still could be. A loaf past reviving became toast, then crumbs, then a thickener in soup. Cooking websites publish bread reviving tricks as recent discoveries. They are not new. They are the first thing any baker's household knew because bread represented hours of labor and none of it could be disposable. A recipe tells you what to make. A kitchen like ours taught you how to think. Number 13, cooking in cast iron and leaving it alone. A well-used iron skillet is not dirty. It is ready. There is a difference. A pan cooked in for years, fat rendered into the surface through heat, layer by layer, has a quality no coating reproduces, and it improves with age. The care was simple. Cook in it, wipe it warm, apply a thin coat of fat, hang it where it stays dry. No products needed. Non-stick coatings replaced cast iron through the 1960s and 70s because they required no knowledge. Most non-stick pans are replaced within a few years. A good cast iron skillet outlasts everyone who uses it. Number 12, carry-over cooking, trusting heat to finish the work. Overcooked eggs and dried-out meat come from people who do not trust what heat does once the source is removed. Things came off the fire before they looked done. The residual heat inside meat, beans, or eggs continues working for several minutes after the flame goes out. Ignore this and you overcook. Honor it and the food arrives exactly right. This is now taught in culinary schools as professional technique. It is a farm kitchen habit that home cooks unlearned when precise electric settings made it seem like the stove was in charge. The stove was never in charge. The cook was. Wet food does not brown. It steams. Those are not the same thing. Number 11, drying vegetables. Before they hit the pan. Before any vegetable went into a hot pan, it was dried, pressed with a cloth, patted after washing, left on a board. Surface moisture kills browning. Put a wet slice of potato into hot fat, and you will hear it boil. The moisture evaporates first, drops the fat temperature, and by the time the surface is dry enough to color, the inside has already gone soft. This step takes 2 minutes and is skipped in nearly every written recipe because it sounds fussy. It is not fussy. It is the difference between a crisp golden edge and something pale and limp. Restaurant cooks know this. So did every kitchen where I watched someone cook because the difference was visible immediately. Number 10, making stock from bones and what the pot left behind. A chicken did not become one meal in a kitchen that knew how to use things. The meat came off for the table. The carcass went into water with vegetable peelings, onion skins, celery ends. Hours later, strained and golden and thick with gelatin from the joints, you had a stock that made everything it touched taste like care had been taken. Chilled overnight, it set to a soft jelly. That was how you knew you had done it right. Bone broth is sold in specialty stores at prices no ordinary household would have considered reasonable. It is pot liquor with a marketing campaign and nothing else. Number 9, using pot liquor as sauce, dipper, and starting point. Pot liquor was not the leftover. It was the point. The dark liquid remaining after a long cook of beans, greens, or smoked meat holds everything the food released. Minerals, starch, fat, salt, hours of slow heat concentrated into something deeply savory. It was ladled into bowls to soak cornbread, used as the base for the next day's soup, given to children who needed what was in it. Discarding it meant throwing away the most nutritionally dense liquid in the pot. Most modern kitchens do exactly that, without thinking about it. The next entry is something every cook has done accidentally, and most have immediately scrubbed away. In the kitchens I'm describing, it was made on purpose every time. Number 8, lifting the brown bits from the bottom of the pan. The best part of what you just cooked is stuck to that pan. Do not scrub it out. When meat or vegetables brown in fat over high heat, they leave behind caramelized proteins and sugars. Concentrated, dark, nearly impossible to reproduce another way. Liquid went in the moment the meat came out. Water, stock, hard cider, preserved tomato juice. It hissed and released everything on the surface, and what came up became a sauce that tasted like the whole meal had been planned from the start. French cooking calls this deglazing the fond. Every working kitchen I remember simply called it what's in the pan, and nothing came off that stove without giving everything it had. What we have lost is not a list of recipes, it is the habit of paying attention. Number 7. Reading the bread crust to know when the loaf is done. A hollow knock meant done. A dull thud meant back in the oven. You turned the loaf over and tapped the bottom with your knuckles. The sound was different enough that anyone who had heard both could not mistake them. A hollow tap told you the interior had cooked through. A thick, deadened sound told you the crumb was still wet at the center, regardless of what the outside looked like. Thermometers pierce the crust and release the steam you worked to hold inside. A thumping hand leaves the loaf exactly as it should be. The bottom color confirmed it. Deep amber brown, not pale, not burned. Between sound and color, no tool was necessary. Number 6. Knowing when jam has set. Without a thermometer, you put a spoonful on a cold plate. You pushed it with your finger. If it wrinkled and held the wrinkle, it was ready. If it spread back smooth, it needed more time. This was the cold plate test, the standard by which every summer's preserving was judged. The plate went into the coolest corner of the house at the start of canning day. Every batch was tested on it before any jar was filled. Commercial pectin packages include their own gel tests now. These work. But they removed the need to understand what is happening in the pot. The shift in sound as the jam thickens, the way drops begin to sheet off the spoon instead of dripping. Those were the signs. The cold plate was only the confirmation. The women who did this work knew every one of those signs because they had learned them by getting it wrong first. When did you last open the refrigerator and cook what needed to go, not what you felt like eating? Number 5. Keeping a mental inventory of what needs. Using. First, we did not plan meals from desire. We planned from the cellar, from the icebox, from the corner of the pantry where things were beginning to turn. What you found told you what tonight would be. The softening cucumber went into a quick brine. The bread past its best went into a savory pudding. The opened smoked meat came off the bone and into a pot with whatever vegetable was most urgent. Meal planning applications are sold now as practical innovations. They are substitutes for a skill that daily kitchen work once built automatically into a woman's thinking. The application tells you what to cook. The older habit taught you how to see what was already there. Number 4. Using cold spaces intelligently. The cellar kept root vegetables at the right temperature, cool enough to slow softening, not cold enough to damage cell walls and turn a firm potato watery. The north-facing window ledge chilled things overnight in winter without freezing them. The spring house, built over running water, held milk and cream at a steady cool. Nothing was stored anywhere without a reason. Every location in and around the house had a temperature, and that temperature was used deliberately. A household refrigerator today keeps everything at one setting, correct for some foods, actively harmful for others. The knowledge of which cold suited which food and why is almost entirely gone. Number 3. Not refrigerating. Things that shouldn't be. A cold tomato is a tasteless tomato. We knew that, and I am still not entirely sure how refrigerating everything became the habit it did. Cold disrupts the cell structure of certain foods in ways that cannot be undone. A tomato held below 50 degrees loses the compounds that give it flavor, and they do not return when it warms. A potato stored too cold converts its starches to sugars. Onions and garlic kept in cold dampness mold and sprout in ways they would not in a cool, dry pantry. What was lost when the refrigerator became the answer to every question was the knowledge of what each food actually needed to remain what it was. There was no meal in our kitchen that did not come from something the meal before it left behind. Number 2, building each meal from what the last one left. This is not about leftovers. Leftovers are what you store and forget. A kitchen that thought forward made extra porridge at breakfast because cold porridge could be sliced and fried for a second meal. The potato water kept in a jar because it made the next bread lighter. The bone from Sunday's roast went into cold water on Monday and drew all week. Nothing stopped. The sequence was continuous, and it required no system because it was simply how cooking worked. What ended it was not laziness, it was abundance. When groceries were cheap and available every day, the pressure that made chain meal thinking necessary simply lifted. And the habit lifted with it. When my mother made soup on Friday, she was finishing what she started on Monday. Most kitchens have quietly let that go. Some of what I have told you can be relearned, given patience. Some of it left with the people who held it. Number 1. Cooking without waste as an orientation, not a technique. We did not cook this way because someone told us to. We cooked this way because every habit on this list was a form of respect for the animal that was killed for the table, for the grain that was grown and carried into the house, for the woman who lit the fire before anyone else was awake, for the family the meal had to carry through a working day. Zero waste is now a marketing term. In the kitchens I am describing, it was not a choice and not a brand. It was the baseline. The question was never whether to use something. The question was how, and in what order, and toward what end. The individual tricks can be relearned. The thump test for bread, the cold plate for jam, the drippings tin beside the stove, the bone in cold water on Monday morning. Anyone willing to practice can recover these. What is harder to recover is the orientation underneath them, the habit of walking into a kitchen and seeing it as a system where nothing stops, nothing is wasted, and everything that comes through the door is already becoming something useful. That was taught by standing beside someone who held it, watching how she moved, understanding why she never set anything down without thinking about what it would do next. It was not written down because writing it down would have missed the point entirely. If the cook in your life did something in the kitchen that you never saw explained anywhere, something she only knew because someone stood beside her and showed her, tell me about it below. I want to know what she never thought to write down.